So here we are, Campfire Confessions, the first maybe of many, or maybe this won't even air, but Bob is already into the beers. Pat, like really, he's already into the beers?
Yeah, he should probably slow down at his age.
Don't buy green bananas.
No green bananas.
Here's the deal. We've got B-Team Bob. You have seen him before, Project Boat. Pat, aka Flathead, you've seen him before, well, catching sheephead, not really flathead, right? But here's the deal. We went out fishing and we were on the eastern end of the Central Basin, or I guess you could almost call it the western end of the Eastern Basin. And we were doing some deepwater fishing, right?
Yep.
So when you're out there and you're in this, so we're going to talk about the day and kind of what happened here, because people seem to like these kind of round tables, talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. When you're fishing, like I'm sure there's going to be some salmon guy that's going to chime in, or some guy from someplace else like, that's not deep water. But when you're used to fishing, most walleye guys, let's say less than 40 feet, generally probably most guys less than 30 feet, it's a whole different world, right? When you get out to 70 feet and then those fish, especially summertime, like it's hot, even though we have Campfire Confessions burning wood, it's a whole different ball of wax, right?
Yep, it's all that, you know, unweighted, shallow bite, that stuff is all out the door.
First thing you said was like, oh, this ain't like fishing back home.
No, because you're sitting there with an inline snap or inline board, and it's pretty straightforward and basic. It's just totally different.
So we're going to talk about kind of what we did and maybe the things that we didn't do that we could have done, or maybe on a different day would have been the deal. But when you're fishing this deep, the number one thing I think you want to start with, and Bob, you correct me if you're wrong on this, is there's so much water out there, right? Like you don't have islands, you don't have structure, you don't have anything. So these fish are chasing bait fish, plain and simple. They're chasing smelt around, generally speaking. The good thing is when you're fishing 70 feet, that transducer angle is so much bigger. Like you can see these things. Back on our end, they can skedaddle out and you don't see them in the transducer cone, right?
Right, but in 75 feet of water, it covers a lot.
Well, the problem is it's just like, there's hundreds of square miles here that these fish could be in, and they move, you know, just constantly. I mean, even today we saw those fish move so much as in a short amount of time. Fortunately, there was just so many of them that even when you're off, you're kind of still on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you know, just where there's bait, there's fish. So there was a lot of bait out there.
The number one thing is you want to look for bait, which is easy to mark, but also look for the walleyes, right? Like those hooks. And when I started seeing those, the number one thing that guys have to be comfortable with, and based on the videos and stuff that we put out there, people are not comfortable with this still, marking fish at speed, even though it's way easier out here in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that with the deeper water, you know, everything shows up a lot better. It's a lot easier. And it's just a bigger picture.
Your cone is three times as wide, and then when those fish are generally deeper in the water column, you're going to mark them better too. So if you're back in like 30 feet of water, where those fish are actually at that we're catching, that transducer cone may only be 4, 5, 6 feet, maybe across. And so they can either skedaddle out of it, we don't see a true picture of what's going on, right?
Right, or yeah, but now now you've tripled that.
So the one thing that I would tell guys to go back and watch, because you saw me monkeying with it, I think on the way out today quite a bit. You know, you start off shore, right? You're in 40 feet and 50 feet and just keep getting deeper, is adjusting the sensitivity. Because when you're marking at speed, I do not like running on auto sensitivity. I don't care if you guys are different or whatever, but adjusting that, and I use a double echo return. That's how I kind of determine, so there's whole videos you guys can go watch on that. But making sure that that sensitivity, because you get too much, you get blown out and you can't see what you need to see. And also the thermocline. So, because that leads me to like the elephant in the room out here is the temp break. Right? Like, is that the second thing for you when you're down here by yourself in your own boat doing that?
Well, I think my primary thing is finding that bait fish and, you know, to see where those fish are in relation to it. But I mean, you can come out here and you can run into schools of bait, but you don't see a whole lot of marks around them. But, you know, then there's other schools of bait where there are a lot of marks by there. So
the fish usually show up to the grocery store though eventually, right?
Well, yeah, but
trust the bait. It's probably easier to fish this deeper water than is the shallower water, because there's a lot more guesswork in the shallower water because of your cone. At least here, you can sit there if you know how to do it with speed. Maybe a video in the future to show people how to be more comfortable with that. But it's probably easier to locate fish here than it is in the true Western Basin.
I think I do, because I mean you see them, like they're there, you see them. I mean, especially because of the depth. I mean, generally speaking, like we're in the summertime, like these fish are 30 plus feet down.
Yep.
And a lot of that bait, you know, those smelt, they're right on the bottom. And I don't know if you noticed, we had such a chaotic day there. We didn't even get all the lines in ever the whole day. And when I finally put that fish hawk down, we had some definite, you know, we never really had a defined thermocline most places. And so there's a couple ways you can see that, right? Like the obvious one is you can see it on your graph. It basically looks like a little bubble trail and it's a hardened line. Most of the day we did not see that. We had one little area, but then again, the easiest thing is don't fight it is the fish hawk. Like you put it down there and we saw that it was actually warmer down below, and that's why I don't know if you noticed this, I didn't say anything yet, but when we had all that bait that was pretty high,
yeah,
guarantees, because that water was cooler, like there was like 2 different levels of those bait fish. Did you notice that on the screen?
We were a little busy to be watching all that stuff, so I didn't really have that.
Did we put you to work today? Talk to me, Bob.
It was pretty nonstop activity, so.
So basically what you're saying is if they watch the video of what we did and we had a rod, and I mean I had to tell you it was on, which is not a big deal, but your first rod out, you were there.
Yeah.
I mean, we got on video. I mean, there's no point in lying about it. I mean, it's not awkward or anything. I didn't even have a rod in the water. I was monkeying around trying to get stuff rolling, boom, and it didn't really stop. But it is the details. Like people will watch that video, and honestly, like that's kind of the point of this, is I don't think they really realize the little factors that you got to do to get to that point. Like people still, like when they watch these videos, they're like, and I humored them right now, especially since it's a new lure that's not out quite yet, but they're so consumed with what lure, where, I mean, I hate to say this out loud, but because we did try a bunch of stuff, and definitely the thunder sticks were the deal, the deep junior thunder sticks, but there was times in that I'm pretty sure we could have caught them on your Crocs.
Just get something in their wheelhouse.
Get it in front of them.
Like, it's actually harder, the approach of fishing, than it is finding fish out here, because it's not as straightforward, your trolling tactics towards them. There's so many different ways to get your bait into that zone.
But 100%. But getting back to the temperature thing, I think guys that I listen to or talk with, and they get all intimidated, because if you fish 20, 30 foot of water all the time and you come out here and you're in 80, 75, whatever it is, and you're like, oh my God, I got to cover the column. That would be, to me, the mistake. And that goes back to the temperature thing, because as much water as we have out here, and like back home, if we know when we're in 30, 40 feet of water, if we could be catching fish 5 feet down or on the bottom, right, or 15 feet down, and sometimes all at the same time.
Right, but there's variability here, but it's just, you know, if you're fishing this stuff back home, well, now, you know, that whole thing is gone. You know, it's just moved down. But there's still, you know, because we saw that, you know, 5 colors did well, 7 colors did well. So, I mean.
Well, don't get ahead of us on that. We'll get to presentations in a bit. But so I guess what I'm getting at is, even though you got 70 feet to cover, to me, it's always a 5 or 10 foot window, because of the temperature and because of the bait. And that's why you, again, not to get ahead of things, but guys that run certain things out here like wire are running the same leads for the last 30 years. They hardly ever change, because generally those pockets are going to be up or down a little bit where those thermoclines tend to set up, or where that temp break is, or where the bait is, which is generally, say, 35 to 55 down.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So advice that you would give somebody that would come down here, off the cuff right now, kind of what we talked about.
Well, I think the big thing is to know where your equipment's running. You know, because if you're, you know, I know we've been out here later in the year, and you know, we might be 225 on a, you know, a dip sea, and you know, which is getting deeper and deeper, but knowing exactly where those baits are and where those fish are is, you know, primary. I mean, without that, you know, and we ran a lot of different stuff today, and knowing exactly where your stuff is, you know, if you miss it by 10 feet, you know, you're just spinning your wheels.
Yeah, I would say even 5 feet. But and that comes in again, the thing, the people that fight this are just crazy to me. The fish hawk, is showing us the speed. So like we eventually got the fish hawk down. I just kind of was doing eyeball stuff and guessing a little bit. And of course, it's a lot easier when you catch one on your first rod out and your second rod out and so on and so forth. But we were running about 2-1, maybe 2-2. When we finally got the fish hawk down, we were doing 2-4, 2-5. That was the kind of the real speed when we put the ball down there. And the difference is the guys are coming down here, and again, we'll get to presentations in a minute, but you know, your dipsy dive, anything with lead, I don't care what it is, you crimp it on, and you're going 2.5 versus 2 versus 1.5, it's drastically going to change on where that's at, to your point of, you know, where in the window. So we've talked about this a million times. You catch fish going west to east, it's flat calm, you turn around to go right back, make a big loop, and you don't catch anything. I'm sure you've been there.
Yeah.
And you know what that is.
Yeah, because you don't understand what the actual lure speed is in the water.
So yeah, 150 back, I don't care what it is or what you got on, you go the other way, and it's a whole different ball of wax because you're not at the same depth. You with me on that?
Gotcha, Steve.
I feel like you bought green bananas again.
Yeah.
Is he eating them?
Not yet.
Okay. So when you've come down here in the past by yourself, not fishing with this amazing team over here, it's really not, but tell me what you typically, what is when you get down into this deeper water, summer migration, again, eastern end of the Central Basin, western end of the or I said that backwards, the eastern side of the Central Basin, the west end of the Eastern Basin. I think I said that right.
Well, I mean, basically, you know, a lot of times we don't have a lot of information when we get down here. So a lot of it is, you know, we're starting to, you know, just go out and look. And it's a lot of it's, you know, what we've done in past years. You know, we're generally out past 70 feet, you know, and then it's really looking for the right, you know, setup. You know, do we have the bait? Do we have the, you know, the fish that were, you know, in the area that we've targeted? And then it just really becomes, you know, what presentation. I mean, we've seen that the presentation, you know, changes from year to year. You know, one day, you know, one year it might be spoons are the hottest thing off dipsies, and we're running 3 dipsies a side. And there's times where, you know, you can barely keep up with 3 dipsies a side, and that's all you run, even though you can run more lines. Other times it's been, you know, weighted crankbaits. So, you know, occasionally the wire. So, I mean, you have to be prepared. I mean, this is probably the one place where we come out here with pretty much everything in the arsenal, because we could be pulling crankbaits, we could be pulling spinners. I mean, years ago, the very first time that I ever came out here, spinners were all I, you know, would use, and you know, we caught them like crazy, and you know, caught big fish that way. But you know, to me, it's, you know, every year's a little bit different, but you have to have everything.
How were you presenting the spinners back in the day?
Just in lines, you know, up to, you know, 3 ounces, and just, you know, spreading out that water column until you figured out exactly, you know, what the magic number was. But you know, we did have to deal, I think, with a little more trash fish doing that. But, you know, the last few years, if we can get it done with, you know, spoons and crankbaits, you know, to get stuff down, you know, that's, you know, we're covering a lot more water that way, and it just ends up being easier than, you know, having to work with the crawlers and dealing with some of the non-targeted species.
That's a nice way of saying that. I came down here almost a year ago right now, just me, camera guy, could only run 6 rods, and we had to blow the day before. And when I got in the parking lot, we launched at like 9 in the morning, which is where most guys are probably coming back in now, you know, that type of deal, because it's an early biter. A lot of guys like to go early. And the crazy part of that was there was not one car in the parking lot. And did he get you, Bob?
Got me sweet big time, man.
Skeeters. Any rate, I went out there and I did not mark a single thing. I mean, literally a complete blank screen for like the first 14 miles driving out. Zigzagging, you know, okay, did I just miss them a little west or east? You know, is it necessarily going north? And I just kept burning. It was rough still, kind of just, the leftover waves. And then all of a sudden we got out to that point, and east or west, it didn't matter. Just that certain depth of water, and it was probably a couple miles of a pile of bait. And then there was it's probably a half-mile section where it calmed down enough we could circle on. We actually did a video on that. Sure, producer dude will put the link in there. And we just mowed them down in a real tight area. But again, yes, presentation, but before you even get there, I think the thing that people will get behind on is trusting the electronics, and then things like the fish hawk, or understanding the speeds and the currents. I mean, how many guys you fish with understand currents?
Not very many, just a few. And those are mainly guys who are salmon fishermen. Like in Lake Michigan, they understand some of that stuff, but most people aren't really in tune with, with how that impacts things. But like I said, we've seen the same thing. You can go for miles, and it feels like there's a desert out there. But then when you finally get to where the fish are hanging out, it's unbelievable the amount of fish that are out here.
The funny thing too is when you get down like in New York waters, you can fish a blank screen and catch them. I can't do that here. I've never really done it here, like in all the years.
I've never fished past
I think there's just
Pennsylvania line.
There's a lot less fish there. Down when we say eastern end of Pennsylvania and west end of New York, I think that's part of it. There's just way less, and they do skedaddle. They're even spookier. I think the water's even cleaner there if it's possible.
Oh, well.
And they get a little higher in the water column at times for some reason too.
Well, like I said, I've never been that far, and I mean, to me, I don't see any need to go any further east than this particular area because of the quality fish that are here.
Obviously bead chains, like we've done a million videos, like I've made a career fishing bead chains and spinners. You're not doing that when you come down here now though, and is there a reason?
Well, I think that I think things may have changed a little bit. We never used to go back then. We never used to go out that far. I mean, we were fishing August, and we were fishing within 60 feet of water. We wouldn't get out that far. But I don't know if that, we don't really see that many fish in that shallower water right now. So, and like I said, we did have to deal with, there were some white bass that, you 3 to 5 pound range. They were huge. You could get into that stuff for a while.
I know Trash Fish King just got excited. You've seen what he does. It's a sheephead slayer.
Well,
I thought he was going to get one today.
Well, it's funny because I remember fishing with Foffords Jr. one time, and he said back in the day, hot and tots and stuff like that they wouldn't fish for walleye until July. Just something to think about, how much has changed, but maybe it's off topic. But
no, it's a different but same thing. I mean, those guys used to drive right over the reefs and all that good stuff. Hey, could you stoke our fire, co-captain?
I could probably do that.
Yeah, even though it's 1,000 degrees out, you can't have campfire confessions without having, Yeah. And we have some secret lighter fluid too, in case we're not very good. But
I think we got some coal.
Yeah, nice. But oh yeah, camera guy getting smoked. Love it. Love it. So let's start talking about presentation stuff a little bit. Do you think that guys that come here, like in travel boats or whatever, like ours, it seems like a lot of them are unprepared?
I don't really exchange information with a lot of people when we come out here. We've been doing this for probably, consistently 2-boat trip for, probably 7 or 8 years. So, our arsenal is pretty well, we've got everything, but we don't really check with a whole lot of people to see what they're doing, but
you're not in the dock talk, Bob.
Well,
there's no messing around.
No, I mean, we go in, get our boats in the water and get out of there.
Hammer.
He's going after former patterns of practice.
Wow, that's very well said. So, but when you look at the big boats, so if guys are talking about doing this, and again, it's kind of like saying, you know, you race Indy cars and NASCAR. It's the same thing as racing cars, but it's totally different, right? So when you go from big boats to boats like ours, like we can't turn and go into the waves like they do. Generally speaking. I mean, you get 3-foot waves, I don't know, maybe you're trolling into those, I don't know. So, and we're generally going with the current, you know, it's totally different with the big boards versus inline boards. But these big boats down here, let's say 30-foot plus charter boats, they're running wire line primarily on boards, and they're running some dipsy divers on the inside, right?
Yeah, primarily. And we've been down, you know, like if you happen to be down by the Ashtabula River where, there, you know, there's a whole list of, you know, their whole line of charter boats, you know, and you'll see the whole set of wire, and then, you know, they're going to run dipsies off the corners, you know, but, and a lot of the stuff is, you know, deep thunder sticks, just, you know, the deep big ones. And, you know, they might have all their rods are all set up that way. So, I mean, if somebody wanted to kind of get an idea, you know, that's just information. Boats are sitting there at the end of the day, you know, so you see what kind of stuff people are using. But you're not just going to go out and, you know, you can see that wire rod sitting there on that boat, but you need to know the details. You know, how much wire is on there, what size of that wire. Most everybody's using pretty much the same stainless wire, but, you know, how is it set up? You know, how do you gonna, you know, run that? And you're just not going to, you know, pick that stuff up, you know, on day one, because you can get into a few snags with wire once in a while. Things will go
haywire.
Go wrong. Yeah,
You see
haywire.
You see what I did there? Yeah.
What
So,
a segue.
ta-da-da. Yeah, and you know the funny thing is like my buddies at Fish USA down there in Pennsylvania, nobody uses wire. And when you talk about the wire bite, it's primarily from Cleveland to not quite the Pennsylvania line. Like that's what they do. And I mean, I've heard so many different things, and it's just funny because guys will say, well, I know a bunch of good fishermen that use wire a lot, and I say, hey, where's 300 feet or 250 feet get you? And they all have a very different answer on what that is, but the reality is there's a number for that, because to get to the details for guys that listen to this about the deep water stuff, I would say almost everybody's using 12 or 15 pound single strand wire, stainless steel. And you do not need, so a little info on this for guys listening, you do not need a twill tip or a fancy rod or anything like this, because that single strand wire is really soft. So, you know, I would say once you use a rod for it, like you don't want to use that for mono, you know, a month later or something. Like it's kind of to me, it becomes a wire rod.
Right.
Not that you can't, but I wouldn't advise that you go that route. But so once you're doing that, the enemy there is kinking, right? Like kinking is pretty much done.
Or if you get a backlash, you're also.
I've seen some backlashes. Yeah. So what are you doing to avoid that?
You just need to let it out slow. Keep that, you know, the clicker on. If you know, but make sure that you've got control of that spool, because, you know, you're putting out over 300 feet, so it's not going to go out, you know, real quick. And it comes in even slower than that. So, you know, it's all just
Pat can tell you how slow it came in. Did you remember what he said? Like, hopefully we can pull the sound bite. He's like, is this for real? When he looked at the line counter?
Yes, this is
Like,
345.
Counter on this? Something like 340 feet or whatever it was. It was ridiculous. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's deadly though. I mean, we had a fish on it in like 1 minute.
Yeah, you just couldn't even get a board on it, and that was it. So
I think it happened 3 times today. We're trying to hook the board on it.
yeah,
There it is.
yeah, but
So I mean, I don't ever, like even videos, people are always like, oh my God, take the clicker off, like with dipsy divers. I don't take the clicker off with dipsy divers either. It just causes so many, it just leave it on, you know? It's like everybody checking to lock the door and then nobody locks the door when you actually leave. Like if you take, getting ahead of ourselves, but if you take the clicker off of a dipsy diver, it causes a lot of problems when you're setting. Like people let them down too fast. Have you ever take the clicker off on your wire, even if it's just you doing it?
well, when you're going out, but I mean, the other thing you can do too is that, you know, if you if you're really worried about, having that open bail, you can always use your drag to, to control how things are going out. I mean, it's not totally unlike lead core. I mean, you don't want, you need to be deliberate with lead core. You're not just going to free spool it, the same with wire. You're going to have, to me, it's just that you maintain control over that line when it's going
You can adjust the brake on a reel a lot better with lead core than you can. My advice, if anybody's listening to this and they haven't done it, is to never take the clicker off with wire when you're using it. You don't like that?
Well,
that's fine. You don't have to.
I mean, the only thing is that when it's going out, you're going to have to, back that off, or to get it out, because when you've got 340 feet going out, on a clicker, that's going to be kind of slow. So the stuff that I let out today, I did not have on the clicker when it was going out.
He's playing with fire. Would you like to walk some coals over here and see? Because that's like playing with fire.
Yeah, do that.
Well,
we did. But I do have one adaptation. I think I'm betting he's going to make a change to his setup on wire. So here's what I like to do when I'm setting these reels up. I like to put, I don't know how much, I just eyeball it because my spools are way big enough for what we're going to have. I put a little bit of mono on there to basically cover the spool up, right? Then I put 300 feet of braid, something like 40-pound braid, 11, 12,000, something like that. And then I put 50 feet of mono in there. All of these are like back-to-back unis, or you can splice however you want. And then we're putting the wire from there. So like little tiny VMC swivel or something that can make sure it goes through your line guide, roller, whatever you want to call it. But the big thing with that is a lot of these guys are going to get extra depth because they call it plus. Like you talk to a charter guy, he's going to say, I've got 300 wire plus. And that means 50 feet of leader is in the water before they hook it up, right? But the big thing what that mono does is it just makes it a whole lot easier to hook up to a bunch of different releases compared to some braid or some other stuff, because braid is not really release friendly. I mean, it chews stuff up, and
yeah, I mean, you have to go to some different release types. But what happens if you want to be going more than that 50 feet?
Well, I don't. To me, with the way that those setups are, then you need to go to a different setup, because when you're using lead core or anything else, that extra 50 feet gives you, let's say, another color and a half or whatever, or it's like having an extra 50 feet of whatever that would be. Those guys then will go to a different setup.
So like
because you proportionally, the problem is you don't get that much more by continuing to put all that in, because you're starting to negate what you're getting with the wire. Which, again, we're all speculating on this, but because you hear guys say the harmonic hum, like sharks, can pick up on this metallic or whatever it is. I mean, some of it I just think is you get good hookups because it's wire, and it's like, well, how much stretch does mono have or braid? It's like, well, I know how much that wire's got. It's 0. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys that talk about it's that vibration on the water, the sound that it creates. But you've just seen it. There's times when it works.
One of the biggest things that I think that it does, because I've seen it like with lead core, where lead core doesn't do this, is when you get into the water like we have with different layers and the density of it, it's actually denser. And a lot of the lead core or different baits like that, they actually all sandwich together, or a flat line crankbait. So you could have 5 colors, 7 colors, and 10 colors that all should run drastically different. They're running the lure at the same depth because it literally doesn't penetrate that denser water. And that's why a lot of guys, salmon fishermen, are using copper line, because it'll penetrate that, and I think that wire's the same deal, where you just don't have that issue. It just cuts through there like a hot knife. You don't like wire though, right? Like, who likes wire?
Well, I think it just becomes an efficiency issue. I mean, if you can, with wire, you're going to have probably 350 feet out. So, that's 350 feet.
You had 350 feet.
That's 350 feet going out, 350 feet coming in. Now, if you're running a dipsy at 100 or 150, that's just a fraction of it. I mean, you're going to be have a lot more fishing time with those dipsies than you are going to have with that wire, because of the fact that, all the time that it takes to go in and out with it. So, if you're going to run 100 or 150 versus 350, that's a big plus. But if the wire is the only thing that's working because of that particular day, that whatever the magic potion is with the wire, then that's what you do. But you want to look at, we try and look at things that are going to be a little more efficient, that we can, if you can get something in and out on a dipsy with 150, that's pretty quick. No boards, it's just
And I think that's why more big boat guys use it, because with big boards, it's a little easier to maneuver, and they can put 5 or 6 on a side. Granted, it takes, just like anybody doing carpentry or finish work or anything, the time that you do it makes you easier and better at it. But
yeah, and I think that, like I said, last year we were out here, actually the last 2 years, it was a crankbait bite. So, we had only run, 1 or 2 dipsies. I think that I grabbed the wire rod like twice, because there was so much activity with what we were running out there, that there was no need to, we didn't find any need to, because we couldn't keep up with what we were doing.
So let's get to the elephant in the room, which was what we smoked them on today. I'm thinking you might even be spooling some of that up now. Is that fair? Is it accurate?
I mean, yes, it is. I mean, previously I've not.
He was wowed by that.
Yes, it was.
B-Team, talk to us. B-Team, talk to us about
How'd that new concept work for you?
If we had some music to play, we'd play some 5-Star Chick right now.
Oh yeah.
But we don't. So tell them what we did.
Well, I mean, we were running 5 colors on one side, 7 colors on the other side.
We're running the core, baby.
Yeah.
It can accomplish the similar thing to wire. It's different, but to me it's a whole lot easier and lower maintenance and less. I think it requires, for a guy that's just going to go fish here a couple days or something, it requires a lot less intimate knowledge.
Right. Lead core over wire. Sure. I mean, that's a lot easier. I mean, yeah. When I come out in a few weeks, I'll have some lead core with me. But
so we did teach you a new trick today, Pat.
Yeah, we'll need a lot more reels though.
He's gonna need a lot more reels. Sounds right.
I wouldn't say it's a new trick, because I've run lead core. I've had lead core reels sitting in the top of my garage for years.
But you've been coming here 8 years and you didn't bring none. What's up?
I thought he brought the arsenal.
Well, I guess I
that's
guess
his own words, Your Honor.
I guess it really comes down to the fact that,
you can only carry so much stuff.
Well, it's not that, we've been very successful with the programs that we've been running. So, I think that one of the things that we saw is that we tried a couple of, the wire technique and the weighted stuff, and had fish on those, pretty quickly. So, I don't know that we necessarily, if we would have run those programs against the lead core, we didn't do that. So we don't have all of the data there to know exactly it was one better than the other.
We couldn't even get the rods in the water. I know what was up.
Well, it's a different style. He's not used to that style.
Yeah, it's just something different. But I learned running that. I'm going to call that segmented lead core, because that's what it is. We got leader on the front and the back of that or whatever, and we've got the lead in the center. I started doing that in like the 90s with a man by the name of Gary Roach and Dave Hansen. Those guys seem to know pretty good about that, but it's changed, because like what we were doing, so the people understand, is like I've used Fish USA Stealth Core. And that's kind of like a lot of the lead core people used to use, but Stealth Core is red and black, so it's stealthy. Like you don't have those colors that are really visible, like blue and orange and all that stuff right in the water. So that's the only really difference. And that's that same kind of diameter, which is 18 pound. And I want that when we're fishing in cold water, okay? Because I want that sheath to be bigger so it falls slower, just like a guy using a light jig head, so it falls slower in the water column instead of rocketing down. Now, there's times you want a jig to rocket down or whatever, and I guess that's kind of why we're using 2 different types of lead core. So in warm water, And summertime stuff like we're doing, I'm using Suffix 832. That's what we 100% every rod that was in the water today, because you're getting considerably smaller, because that sheath is not a like Cordura or whatever that, you know, old school braid sheath that's around the lead, because it's quite literally a lead center. And that 832 is like a braided, like a gore fiber, and it's so much smaller. It's just the difference of running 30-pound mono with a crankbait or 6. I mean, it gets you considerably deeper. And when you get to some of these leads and depths that we're trying to get at, you can't almost get there without just letting out an exponential amount of line to even, you almost bottom out. It's just like taking a reef run or a tail dance or whatever that bait is. You run them at 250 feet, you aren't really any deeper than you are at 120.
Right.
Sometimes you actually go backwards. You get a belly in the line.
Yes.
And you go less. But so I guess we'll explain a little bit, kind of like the wire line, what we were doing on there. If you want to watch that video of us doing that, it'll be in there. But we had a leader like 30-foot long monofilament. We had our colors, like you said, 5 colors, 7 colors, 2 different reels. We put 1 on each side because we wanted to be the same length for clearing out, not tangling, which we did really good with that. With all the kudos to you guys. I mean, you were slow, Bob. I mean, Pat called you molasses a couple times, and I was like, yeah, I'd give.
No, when I called out the 340, I just wanted to make sure you had enough time to get to the net.
It's a rough crowd, Bob. It's a rough crowd. But you're on the
Slow and steady wins the race, though.
Did it? I don't know. But so on the back side, that we're putting that 50-foot section of mono in there. So again, we can hook the board up. And then sometimes we'll put that in the water to get us a little extra depth. So like if we weren't catching, for an example, on those 5s, which we were, but if we weren't and we're catching them on the 7s, most guys, maybe you don't have that many reels, or you want to quickly make that change, you can put that extra 50 feet of mono in there and get you closer to what that 7 is. And that may be enough of that depth difference, to do it. Like, that's all you may need. And you can clip a snap weight on. Some guys put them on the front of the leader, in between the leader and the lead core. Some guys put them at the back side of the lead core and the leader that goes towards the rod, to basically change that line angle and get that down. Just little tricks to get those things that are deeper. And then I've kind of got that same thing. I've got a bunch of braid on the backside, in case you get a steelhead or something that starts ripping you out. And then just enough mono to cover your spool, because as you know, you worked in a tackle shop long enough. You guys, if you're spooling these up, the whole thing will literally slip on that braid. So you want to cover that spool with mono, or I see guys use tape or something. But
get some grip.
Yeah, you're going to get a little grip in that booty. But you're going to get you some Suffix 832, aren't you? I know it. Did you already order it? Be honest. I saw you on your phone.
Should I be this influenced by you?
Bob, it's way too late for that. He saw.
Yeah.
The people watched the video.
You witnessed.
No, there was a couple times I had to tell him he had a fish on, because before he even got the board on. But why be picky, right?
Yeah, I mean, he had to learn.
But let's talk. I'm gonna pick on you a little bit. Shocker. So snap weights. A lot of guys like snap weights. I know you like snap weights with the crankbaits. It's quicker. It's easier. But the thing is when you start putting 3 or 4 ounces on, and I'm not trying to talk somebody away from doing this. Me and you have done this a lot in the past, farther west generally. But the difference is when you turn or do little speed adjustments, all that weight is at one point. And I think that's why lead core is so successful, because it's distributed amongst, like today, 150 or 200 feet roughly of line, instead of having that weight all at one point where you pendulum. And I think you get a way better, I'm going to say I know I get a way better hookup and landing ratio with lead core, because you don't have that pendulum thing.
That gap when that hits, and you're making up this distance.
That's right. You don't have no triangle stuff going on. Yeah. But at the same point, we put some snaps out. We caught some fish on that. But I think it's more difficult to maintain that little window. Is that fair?
Well, I think a lot of the times when we come out here and we get set up, it's pretty much one pass and done, because these fish are coming up from deep water. Everything is, goes in the box. So, and the schools of fish are, you start in them and you never really get to the end of them. So,
he's getting cocky.
No, I just telling you, we don't have to, typically it's, like I said, it's a one pass deal with. So,
I mean, even if you got to go all the way to Cleveland?
we turn around and we
makes
get
it-
to Buffalo.
I know guys that make 20-mile passes, just say I did them in one pass. You know how that is. But you went to Buffalo a couple times, had to call and get
Yeah.
you a new license.
I think that there's probably nothing that, would solidify my position on this that you would agree with. So
Yeah.
I think I can just, just passively agree.
So what are some tricks when you do that? You're probably generally using 3 or 4 ounce, much more than 4 ounce. In my opinion, gets a little tough on inline boards.
We typically,
Fire stoker.
pretty much just mainly 3 ounces. Sometimes we'll go to a 4.
Does leader length make a huge difference in your opinion? What should these guys that are coming down here doing this? What should they be thinking?
We pretty much just, snap everything on at 50 feet.
Okay.
That's been pretty much, and, like I said, it takes a little bit to find out, what's working. And like I said, it varies. Some years, our Dipsy and Spoon program is, it just lights out. We'll actually go to 3 Dipsies a side, just to maximize that, and not worry about, we might only have 1 crankbait line out there, just because we can, maybe run 4 lines. We've got 3 or 4 guys in the boat, so we can, try and get closer to that maximum, but we very rarely go over 6 or 8 lines. But it just, we let them kind of tell us what's working. So we start off with a lot of different stuff. When I'm out here, I've got a good friend of mine, and we're always working together. We're probably within a couple of miles, and we just start off with till we find out exactly, we get dialed in, and pretty much once we figure it out, it's the rinse and repeat day after day, and like.
So you think that when you get into a pattern, that tends to be good for your whole trip and maybe even the season?
Well, I don't know about the season because we're not here, but it's definitely for the week that we're here, it generally pretty holds pretty true for that period.
So I got one I think you'd agree with. So whether somebody's a wire guy or a lead core guy or a bob snap weight guy, see what I did there? Yeah. I think one thing that's really important is I think you narrow down the type of baits that you use to things that run very true and don't get knocked out of whack. Because like guys that run wire, there's a reason that they've been using deep junior thunder sticks for 30 years is because it's no secret, reef runners are a great bait or whatever, but they hunt and they get knocked out of tune easier, right? That's not a great bait to run on these things down here because, again, exponential, when you have even more of that out, they wander even more. And that would be, I think, a big tip for somebody that hasn't done this or is thinking about doing this is to get a bait that is definitely not one that's going to get out of tune, or if you're not good at checking or tuning or all of those things.
Right, because if you have one of those that gets out of tune and you don't see it,
you take out a whole side.
It's lights out. It just it'll run into the other lines, and next thing you've got 3 rods or 2 rods that are they're done. They get you got to grab 2 more out of the rod locker, and because those ones you have to.
I'm trying to think how this work. Would that cause quiet time? Because Bob likes quiet time. You've heard him.
Yeah.
He asks for quiet time all the time.
There's an episode about that coming up.
there's an episode to Quiet Time Bob. Not to be confused with Silent Bob, but do you think that would I be quiet or would I be animated if we took out a whole side because somebody...
I would wish it was not me. Decades of abuse.
Decades. We probably would remind you of that in 2034 or something.
Yeah, every day for the next 20, 30 years, yes.
Bob, we probably wouldn't have to worry about Bob in that one.
No, the green bananas. It goes back to the green bananas.
So what are some other tips that you could give us with some of your snap weight? Is there anything that you've kind of found with the snap weight stuff?
Not really. I mean, it's just, you know, figuring out the, you know, sometimes the profile of the bait, you know, how big that bait, you know, will be. A couple years ago, it was, you know, bigger baits, like, you know, the bandits. There were some smaller bait profiles last year. So, you know, once, you know, again,
Do you think some of that has to do with depth? Because like I was running big last year, big thunder sticks. Again, staying away from shorts as part of that. But the other big thing would be, to me, I get more depth. Like a lot of guys with wire change their shallow baits to like a deep junior thunder stick to a deep thunder stick because they're figuring they get more depth out of it.
well,
That's what the big boat guys do. They adjust their depth with the lure.
right, but how much does the size of the bait relate to the size of the bait fish?
I don't know. I think those are all debatable things because just like fire tiger minnows, no minnows in the lake, they're fire tigers, right? But yet they catch an awful lot of fish. But I know like last year for us, it was getting the extra depth. I did not catch them on the shallower stuff, and it was totally depth because we had to put 2-ounce weights on the lead core because they were just super, super deep. And that became the theme where we were just using bigger baits. I think it was a depth thing because I'd even put the same color on a deep junior thunder stick and it literally did not get bit, and you put the full size ones out and it's just thunder plowing.
So if you would have switched out some of the baits today from juniors to deep AJs, you think that would turn it off?
I can tell you what I would have done if we were catching them. Obviously we started really strong on the 7 colors. 5 kicked in really quick. If it wouldn't have kicked in, I either would have waited one or put a bigger bait on, or yanked them and put 7s on everything. Because sometimes it's the side of the boat too, right? Like the current pull, like the way you're going. Because remember, that wind changed about 45 degrees today.
Right.
And when we made that swing, it was like, okay, because we even, like, a couple of the rods were like, did we have a fish on or not? Because they were hanging back so hard. And it was from a turn. Like, the time we did 2 little turns, we caught fish on the dipsies, which we'll get to soon. But there's a lot of minutia, I think, that people just don't think these little things make a difference.
Does it make a difference on which side of the boat I'm standing or not?
Usually, if you're there, your karma is subtracting at least 2 fish.
Okay.
I've seen days at 3 or 4, but I don't know, maybe he just needed to go to church that week or something. You know what I mean? I mean, how do you feel about that, Pat?
I was actually just looking at his legs, and I was just wondering, do you use Nair? He's got really nice legs. Sorry.
I can't even go there. I can't do it. That is so... He's over there. He's doing calf raises while we're doing this little shoot. I mean, that's cool. No problem, Bob. He's got big shoulders. He's got big shoulders. You'd have to. But so let's start talking about the dipsy divers, because I think that's like
something stronger than beer. Quickly,
Bob. How many beers have you had?
I don't know, but it's not. It's certainly not enough.
Bob, are you medicating? Could anyone that watches this could we get a number? 1-800 just say no. Bob, do we have to get Nancy Reagan? Is Nancy Reagan still alive? Just say no. I don't think. Does Nancy Reagan's daughter?
Well, Nancy and Bob were the same age, weren't they?
Oh, God. This is going downhill fast. Anyhow, back to dipsy divers. So let's give a little quick rundown on dipsy divers. A couple things that I would tell you I think are beneficial you got to do is, like, that's the time I'm using braid. Like, I'm not saying don't use mono divers. I know the guys do in certain circumstances, but the braid is going to help you not only get deeper, it's going to help you see the bites, it's going to help you get the trip, the mechanism, because it's a little release deal. If you guys don't know what we're talking about dipsy divers, we have multiple videos on just dipsy divers on our YouTube channel, so check those out. But is it fair, like, do you ever run anything, a dipsy that's not braid?
No, because I mean, you know, you start running, you know, if you're on a 3 setting and you're at, you know, 250 and you're trying to release, you know, that thing on mono, you know, good luck, you know, so, you know, I've never run anything other than braid for dipsies, so.
going to get, like I said, it's going to give you the extra depth and the strike detection. Because I think the one thing that people can't realize, like, if you're not catching them on dipsy divers and you're catching on other stuff, check your lines. Because you may be dragging one. I have seen giant fish time after time after time that just swim with. It's crazy.
Yeah, and a lot of it is, knowing your equipment and knowing the angles. If you see that, especially after you get everything set, look at the angles of those lines going in the water. And if you see one of them, changes by, 10 to 20 degrees, it starts raising up, you know that something's different there.
So basically we're towing the weight behind, and it's caused that whole line angle
Absolutely.
to go. And we've got videos out there showing that 100%, that's the deal. I like to try to get those things at like a 45. Once you get to a 3 setting, I'd say it's almost like a 60-ish,
Right.
where those are actually going to be at the water. But I think the biggest thing with rods is, on a dipsy rod, is people go to a store, especially if it's not somebody that knows what's up. And that's why people like Fish USA are so valuable for this. And they buy a rod that says a dipsy diver rod. What they don't realize is that's like a king salmon dipsy diver rod. And it takes so much to load that you not only have a different action on there, but it's almost impossible to see that there's a fish on. Is that fair?
Well, because they're just heavy duty. It's,
Pool cue.
Yeah.
And I like a softer rod. Like, I know some guys that basically use heavy downrigger rods. Like medium heavy downrigger rods, like Shimano Taloras, for example, which have been around forever. But I'm kind of using like an in-between stuff, but I want it more moderate. I want to be able to keep that rod loaded too, also when we go into slower speeds a little bit, when you're not just going Mach 10.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just, having your setups and being consistent, or, even like from side to side, you might get some, a little bit of current difference from side to side, or a little different pull, but, being able to look at where those lines are, how those rods are loaded up, is going to tell you if there's something going on there. So, a lot of times it's like somebody will be in the boat and they won't even see that, this thing's, and it maybe raised 10%, 10 degrees. And then, that just tells you that something's going on there. So you got
when in doubt, check it out. So when you're running these, you generally run 2 aside, a lot of it just because of amount of rods that we can run to run other things, like to your point. But if you are going to run 3, a 0, a 1.5, and a 3, or where are you at?
Yeah, pretty much that'll be it. Because it can be a little nerve-wracking when you got 3 on a side, because those, it looks like, from the surface standpoint, that those lines are pretty darn close together. And if you get a dipsy that goes wacko.
Wait a minute, how does a dipsy go wacko?
Well,
let's talk about this. Is it like Pat wacko, or where are we at?
Well, I don't know if there's such a thing as Ross wacko, but anyway.
There is.
Normal.
There is. Camera people, the neighbors, the people I don't even know.
I mean, you just have to be, you have to be careful you're running 3 aside. And what I will usually do is, like, if I get a fish on the middle dipsy or the outside dipsy, when I put it back in, I'll run it off the opposite corner, and I'll go around it that way, because especially, if I've got other people in my boat that are helping and doing stuff like that, I think that's a little better method. It's because some people can't really pick up, where those other lines are, and especially if you've got, you're putting that third one out and you're trying to get it out past those other 2. I kind of subscribe to using it, that opposite corner to run that dipsy back, with the thing that it's.
You're basically going to walk it across the top.
Yeah, because it's this one, the one that's going to the outside is not going to be as deep as the other ones, and it's going to be back further. So theoretically, it should go right around and come right into place.
And we didn't do much changing because we kind of had a good setup. There was a few things that caught them better than others, but Deep Junior Thundersticks on the lead core was smoke show. Those new colors were just absolute, just fire. It was hotter than that fire.
Yeah, I need stoke again.
You've been doing a good job though. Appreciate that. You've always been good with your wood. So, at any rate, Is that too much?
No, he's stuck up for B-Team Bob, and he's just loving it right now.
Yeah, he's taking a few lumps.
He's taking a lot of them.
He's lumpy like mashed potatoes back when the powder.
Yeah,
like,
I think he's in a dry town. That's probably his last one. Before bedtime. It's almost 7 o'clock.
Oh my gosh, this is just a rough crowd, Bob. I can't even imagine what would happen if you were in the lake, right? But at any rate,
you know, there's that movie.
you survived the whole day. I didn't think you would.
You know, where you look at, you know, Christmas past and Christmas future. I'd like to see Ross' future when he is.
Well, now what may I be? Remember, what was I going to potentially be with Bob? What did we talk about today in the boat?
Oh, I'm trying to remember.
That probably won't make the video.
No, it won't make the video.
Family?
Go ahead, Ross.
His redheaded son-in-law?
Son-in-law, yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, his daughters are happily married. He has 3 of them. But can you imagine if something, a freak accident,
yeah.
and then I show up? But he wouldn't have to worry about having the lead core reels.
No.
Yeah, and then his daughter would be like, "Can you get my dad on some fish?"
Yeah.
And we wheel him down to the dock and.
Yeah.
Let me take the little show to the boat.
I want to see Ross when he's knocking on 67. I just want to see that. I'd like to see that.
That'd be like 10 years past death, right?
Yeah.
Probably. Anyhow, back to dipsy divers. So the one thing that I would tell you with those is, and you kind of hinted at it when you talked about, you know, resetting one. So basically what we're talking about is like you got one close to the boat on, let's say 1.5 setting. You catch a fish on the 3, which is outside. Now you got to get that back in the water. Assume we got the fish in the boat, everything worked fine. You know, that fish came up and around good, no problem. Now once you reset that, and today I know you were kind of like, oh my God, because we were running like 10-foot leaders on our spinner rods. So we started with spinners just to try something different. You know, I like doing that. We run some double willow silver streaks. And when you have a 10-foot leader, there's not really netting, setting. It's just awkward. Like there's no way around it, is there? I mean,
yeah, I mean, like, especially if you get in, you know, some rougher conditions and you've got, you know, trying to deal with that length, you know, past the dipsy. You know,
Bob, it takes serious veteran skill for them.
Well, you like to hang back on the motor. This guy doesn't get that close to the motor when he's nutting, so.
I'm probably only a couple years left I can do that. A couple years probably.
Those days are gone.
Yeah, no, I get that's smart. That's smart.
Gypsy question. Now, when I was in outdoor retail, what I always did with the salmon guys, especially with a newbie that wasn't quite sure and they were going to try to fish 3 dipsies on the side. I know you guys probably don't do it, but I always had them do red and green for port and starboard for snubbers. So that way, if they put it on the wrong side, it wouldn't wipe out the whole other side, you know. But you guys probably don't use snubbers for walleyes much, do you?
Most people do. I don't.
Okay.
But again, when I'm trying to determine if there's a bite or not, now I got a snubber in there. And really a snubber, as you know, is not for, it's for impact. And when these walleyes, we can barely tell there's a bite. Why would I put another shock absorber in there that's gonna, you know, affect my strike detection? It's gonna affect my hookup by giving that bungee in there. So yeah, I don't do that personally. You wanna do it, go for it, whatever. But wrapping electrical tape, for me on a rod, like that'll tell you the same thing. Like if you noticed on my rod butts, I've got, you know, tape on those, and that's why I can quickly look and see, okay, what that is.
Okay.
Another big dipsy thing, because it happened today. And remember, I gave everybody the warning, and it happened, unfortunately, it happened to me, and I caught it, is whether it got, you know, we had just chaos going on, right? Like if they watched the video. And I'm putting the dipsy in the water, I'm like, huh? I pulled it back in, and I looked at the dial, and it had shifted. You know, rather it was a little loose or it got banged around from drug on the carpet because we just had all those lead core rods just firing away. But if you put, you've got one that's a 3 setting and you slide it or accidentally goes to the opposite side of the boat or to a 2 setting and you already have a 1.5 down there, dude, you got big problems. You got big problems. So that's another thing I would tell people is to take a second. It's kind of like tuning your crankbait. When you put it in the water, check it every time. Dipsy divers, flip that thing real quick and make sure that it is the side, it is the thing or whatever, or that it has, because those dials can move. Again, we won't get into crazy details on dipsy divers. Watch our specifically dipsy diver only videos if you want to know, but on the back they have a dial left and right, 1, 2, and 3. That's going to change that planing angle and they can move.
That's my bad.
Wow. Wow. Hey, is that your alarm for stoking the fire?
Yes, it is.
You're doing a fine job. So let's talk about leader length. I'm going to tell you that there are times I know guys using 15-foot leaders, but I would say 8 or 10 with spinners get you more bites, in my opinion. I would say you're on the low end of that, let's say 7 or 8 with crankbaits. And then with spoons, because it kind of can affect the action, maybe 5 or 6. Are you?
7 is probably the average. I think we, use for, all around and be able to switch, baits. But pretty much aim for 7. But one of the things that people really need to be careful about, and especially if you start, the fish start falling deeper and you're running a 3 setting at 200, they have to realize if that dipsy trips and you're reeling it in, where's that thing going to come up at the surface? If you've got board
on the
lines,
inside board,
if you've got, be very, very aware of how that dipsy comes up in relation to your board lines, because you can very easily, get caught up in that. You figure that if you're at 200 feet where that 3 setting comes up, if you've got a board that's only 100 feet off your boat, it could be trouble right here in River City.
And we had that a few times where you notice me getting out and moving those boards and slide them out, and it's tough because you really have to, I think that the biggest thing when you're doing all of this is that the people can't understand the difference between guys that are more successful, have less tangles, or probably both, there's a correlation there, is you got to be playing chess. And the little things that you're doing, when this is happening, I'm over here moving these boards and getting them farther out so that if that 3 setting does go, that we don't only not lose that fish, but we don't tangle another line. And you're right, it's those little things that make a big difference. But now you can't move that because we got a board coming across the top. I see people moving rods all the time on the same side when a fish is on, and in most cases, to me, that's not what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean,
if you got a snap weight and I see people like dropping lines back with a 3-ounce weight on it, it's going to drop it right on its head.
Well, yeah, I get guys sometimes that, they think that by, moving this board around this will help, but in some cases, they're putting it, right into harm's way.
Exactly.
So
100%. And sometimes you know what? I think some people you just got to do that a few times and then learn like, hey, that doesn't work when this happens.
Well, I like to be,
Can we do that in your boat though?
Very casually and with much control, explain to them how that's not a good idea.
I don't probably have the control part when I do the explanation, right?
I might get a little animated, but my little animation is much different than your little animation.
I've heard you drop the F-bomb, Bob. Don't go all high and mighty on me, okay?
I bet it makes the ground just shake.
It does. Like there was like, I thought I saw an arc for a minute.
Like that's just how they're adjective to us, but he says it.
Correct. Yeah, no, those dipsies are, that's something I think if you're coming down here, you better have a setup for that, because even if it's not firing, you can still pick away some fish and they don't really mess with your other stuff.
Yeah, in some cases, even if they, you've got a good, like last year was a good crankbait, we'd still run an inside dipsy or 2.
You can run stick baits, so on dipsy divers, again, 101, you pretty much want to run shallow baits on there. The dipsy is doing the diving. And then we're using, at least all the guys I know, we're using a size 1. And there are different rings and aftermarket things you can put on to get a little extra depth because it creates a larger surface area. I don't generally do that, but I've got some stuff if need be.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that, I work with another boat. We all have the same setup, as far as the divers. We're all using the same divers. So, the ability to make sure that, when you're, whoever you're, if you're working with somebody, that, you're not doing something totally different and they don't have the same equipment to be able to match what you're doing. So, that's a big key, that everybody's on the same level as far as the equipment. that we're running the same divers.
What's the odds he's trying to borrow the new color Deep Junior Thunder Sticks for his trip?
If he's been around you enough, he's already got 2 in his box.
He would only have 3 fingers. It'd be hard to put those clips on.
You'd have to find it.
Yeah.
What is it am I borrowing?
Deep Junior Thunder Sticks, the new ones, the new colors. Were those, I mean, I'm not a color guy, like we talk about this, but man, those things were really, you just wonder sometimes, is it really something they haven't seen? Because they were so good. Like, I mean, we caught stuff on the classic rainbow trout. We caught some stuff on some classic stuff, but dude, those were fire.
Well, I mean, it does open, another question of, I just naturally thought that I'd have a snowball's chance in hell of, being able to borrow those baits from you, but.
Have you ever had Roscoe in your crankbait box?
No, because he just generally not in my boat.
No,
Okay.
I don't need to borrow anything from Bob. I got too much.
You snagged 1 or 2 for me, I remember that.
I did. He had a J7 Rapala in a color. Yeah, in a color they don't make anymore. Just saying that might catch fish. Just saying. But so one of the things that I think is like a topic that we talked about but we didn't talk about is if people watch my stuff, and I know me and you completely argue and fight over this, but I don't trip my boards most of the season. Many reasons, whatever, story for another day. But when you're doing this and we're running 5 colors or everything the same, or let's say it'd be like if you were running wiggleworts and they're all 80 back on the side, right? That's the time, and you're going fast, because that's the big thing and the reason. So people say, why are you doing this now? Because I can see the comments coming. We couldn't have done what we did, as hard as it was to keep stuff in the water, if we wouldn't have had that board tripped and file basically behind the boat. But because we're doing 2.5 miles an hour and we have all the same leads, basically, that's why our 7 colors were on one side, our 5 was on the other, that it allowed that to take place, right?
Well, it's kind of hard for me to debate that topic because I release my boards.
I know, that's why when we spinner fish, I'm not going to tell you the results of that, but
and it's very successful for me, and so and it's very efficient for me. It saves a lot of confusion of moving stuff around. So, yeah, today, I mean, if you had to try and move those lines out of the way and inside one with all that lead, it would have just
nightmare.
Yeah, it would have taken so much time to try and because when you're reeling that thing in now, it's it's going a lot faster. I don't think it's going to be you've lost productive time from the time that it's coming all the way in, and then if you move it and if you're going to be able to try and let it out, it's just that's just a lot of
monkeying.
Not a non-productive fishing time. So
we were using the Dubro. It's actually a downrigger release, and you helped me put some of those on because we drilled them out and put them on a regular inline board. And I kind of like that one. I'll see if the guys are picking up steam using that one.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been using the orange clips, but after using those, I think that I'd like to, I might just set up aside and just run it for, a couple months and see how it performs.
No pad to wear out. It's kind of a nice thing.
Yeah, I want to see the results of, maybe running it consistently, for quite some time, just to see if there's any impact from a line standpoint. The thing the fact that once you get that line in there and you twist it, just made so much sense, once we figured that part of it out, that, I kind of like that. But like I said, what I do with the orange clips now works great, but, I think that might be a game changer.
You did not just say that. That's like an inside joke in the fishing business, right? When like everything's a game changer, and Bob's got some friends that are, I don't know what they got going on, but they think they're game changing, even though they're wearing bell bottoms.
Yeah, but they eventually came back in style.
If you wear it long enough, so you're only looking like a fool for like 30 years or something.
But it's came back in style for Bob twice so far.
Green bananas.
Yeah.
You know what his code word could be? You know, like how they're like, you know, landing eagle, you know, green bananas. It's just like we've got so many green bananas could be his code.
Actually, on a serious note, like,
Serious, because that's what this is.
no, like on a serious note, like,
It's like an oxymoron, isn't it?
it's not like Ross's style is better than Bob's style. It's just
Well.
styles. It's like,
Well, no,
Pat, I thought it was Ross's way or the wrong way.
well, Ross will always listen, but that's why he's such a good fisherman. Please edit that out. And but he's always trying to look at someone else's style and sit there and see if he can take a little tiny piece and incorporate it into his style or his arsenal to make him better. It's not that he's sitting there listening and trying to say someone else's style is incorrect because it's not his style, but maybe there's a little piece that he could take from it to make him a better fisherman.
There you go.
More people did that instead of my style versus your style, they'd all become better fishermen.
most
Is that
fishermen.
another $20 that he just earned? or what?
Most fishermen, I mean, he whooped you so bad today, you know, green bananas that I don't even know what's up. But that's going to be a new color lure. I'm going to tell you right now, that's a new color lure. Because I have the naming ability on lures. Like, do you know the new Fish USA exclusive Silver Streak spoon is called Lobsterson? That's an inside joke.
Okay, what I want is if
Green bananas.
it comes to fruition, I want Bob to autograph it for me.
I can make that happen.
Thank you.
That's a done deal. But any rate, so last thing I would say with presentation wise, and probably I know you don't do this, or maybe I'm judging because I do that. And I don't use them much, but downriggers. So we didn't even get one down today, in fairness, like we couldn't. And I honestly brought it because I wanted to have the fish hawk down easier and also to get it deeper, you know. So I use an X2, generally speaking, and I don't put that weight down, you know, because again, when you're in 30 feet of water, I don't need it down 28 feet down, right? But when you get that pocketed current and also the temperature, so I wanted to see the temperature on the fish hawk throughout the column, like to let that down, that X2, the portable method, without a downrigger is like, ugh. But as you may even learn today, a lot of people don't know this, you can use an X2, which is a portable version. You can still plug that in and use it with an X4 transducer, or basically a fixed downrigger style mount, which is what I did. And just, you know, it's a little battery operated monitor.
Well, I don't have a downrigger.
Have you ever fished them on boats or?
No.
Really? Okay. Maybe he should incorporate that into his arsenal.
Well, if you showed him maybe a little bit tomorrow,
We will.
probably set one up.
I want to try to get him to buy lead core and downriggers, and then we're going to talk to Mrs. Green Bananas and see what she's got to say about all this, like expenditures. He's going to have to run a lot of fishing trips now.
Yes.
But you know, in all seriousness, I'm not really a downrigger guy. I think in a lot of cases, there's things I've seen where they spook them, you know, and even they'll shut down a diver bite, and you pull it up, and you're like, okay, or they're just not necessary. But when you're running lines out here and you want to run something down, there's not much easier than a rigger. You know, it's an easy line. It doesn't really get, you know, I don't want to say it's tangle free, but
Yeah, but it's a pretty expensive and involved piece of equipment, you know. So,
what isn't in fishing?
well, I mean, a downrigger as opposed to, you know, a dipsy or snap weight or lead core, it's, you know, that's substantially different.
Can be.
So,
If you're a Deepwater guy though, and you were coming down here more often, or you lived down here, do you think you'd have one? Or you were steelheading more, maybe even? That's a
I
guess. So
just don't like that piece of hardware hanging on my boat.
this is OCD's. The OCD is kicking in. It's the bouncing part. In closing, what do you think?
Oh, sorry. Oh, I didn't mean that to be. That was supposed to be my inside voice.
Bob, this is not helping your case. You know, like when you go to the judge, I'm sure you've had these few back in your wild days, and you know, you start cursing out the judge before he gives you your sentence. Mm-hmm. That's just what he just did.
Exactly.
It's not very smart.
Hey, with only 3 months to go.
Green bananas. What would be some other, get a couple quick, simple tips that you could give somebody preparation-wise? Maybe because, again, we went and wandered around some tackle stores. You know, you've been down here at Blow Days. You wander around. A lot of these are bait stores, right? Like they got bait. They don't have a ton of tackle. You probably need to visit Fish USA or something like that and see, because they don't have a huge sampling of stuff. So is there any tips? It doesn't have to be tackle wise, but that you could maybe quickly tell somebody in the parking lot and maybe help improve their fishing trip down here in the deep water?
Well, I think that, you know, one of the things is that, you know, when you're planning a trip to come out here, you know, look at the calendar. I mean, like last weekend, there was a lot of activity. If you would have been wanting to go out to Ashtabula last weekend with, you know, a couple tournaments, you know, it would have been challenging. You would have been, you know, frustrated by the, you know, the ability to get on the water. But a lot of it is, you know, just trying to gather as much information as you can as far as, you know, where things are going, and making sure that you've got, you know, the different presentations. You know, you start packing all those rods. You know, if you want to have 6 Dipsy rods, you know, 4 lead core lines, 6 mono rods, 4 wire lines, you know, a lot of that stuff gets to be, you know.
My 622 is loaded up right now.
Yeah, it's a lot of equipment, and you know, so you know, don't try and go out on one day and try all of those presentations, you know, because, you know, you're not going to be able to give each one of those presentations enough time to, you know, to run wire and dipsies and lead core and snap weights, you know, just kind of, you know, doing it willy-nilly. You have to, you know, make sure that you're prepared, and you know, you come up with a strategy, and, you know, I think preparation when you come out here, you know, and know that you know, you're out here in deep water, and you're, you know, 10 to 15 miles offshore. You know, you got to pay attention to that weather, because this is Lake Erie. You know, she can come up and, you know, in a heartbeat. You know, with the waves and stuff like that. Just be very respectful of the weather out here, because, you know, we have a little bit of, you know, we're fishing, you know, over by the islands. You know, we have some options. You know, we get a west wind. We have some places to hide. If we, you know, there's no place to hide out here other than
no waves,
like right here.
A 20-mile-an-hour wind down here is way worse than a 20-mile-an-hour wind back home.
Right, because it's got the whole lake to build that, you know, so that whole amount of water that gets pushed around down here is kind of you know, expanded to the point where, you know, what you might fish down there, those conditions you can't fish here, or you can't be comfortable. So, and, you know, have enough insight to be able to look at that forecast and know what that weather's doing, not only from the wind forecast, but also, you know, looking at the, you know, is there storms coming and stuff like that. Because if you're 15 miles out and it comes up and you're going to be having to run back in 4 to 6 footers, it's not going to be comfortable. So, you know, just preparation for this area to me is, you know, gets ratcheted up a little bit more, just because of, you know, the kind of water that you're in, and, you know, the amount of distance that you're covering, you know, to get to the fish.
I would agree with that. That's the first time I think me and Bob have agreed. Do you have anything that you've learned or you've seen, like, on this, that's all seriousness, in the boat, where you're like, oh?
When you said your tape on your dipsy rods, that was good. I noticed you changing the tape on the one. I was like, what's this about? So that
might have been a prototype rod.
Okay, well, all right, well, but I noticed that trick that you used.
Okay.
I noticed that just a lot of different ways of fishing it. It was a lot more interesting to me than fishing the Western Basin, because this was a lot newer to me.
Hit him with the core.
Hit him with the core. Yeah. There's
an old saying in Red Wing, with lead they're dead. And I don't think they were talking about eating paint chips either. Bob, you think Bob's ever ate paint chips?
He would if he gets some lead core setups.
Yeah, you're dang right. Well, I want to thank you guys for participating in our first Campfire Confessions with Captain Bob, aka B-Team Bob.
GB.
Pat, aka Flathead, aka really a sheephead slayer. If you watch our catfish show where you learned, this is a good one. Shrimp sometimes are not as good as hot dogs for a catfish.
Yes.
And you're the catfish guy. Like, you're the guy that I ask about these things. Just not that day.
Stuff happens.
It does. Thanks for tuning in again. Thanks for you guys for hanging out. I mean, it's pretty hot out. And we have a fire going because you can't have Campfire Confessions without a fire. But we probably didn't need it because it's like 100. Make sure you check us out on Bigwater Fishing, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff. Obviously, we've got podcasts, tip videos, and that whole stuff. Producer Dude can put all the links down there. Obviously, we've got a bunch of videos out there, new every week.